Kidding. Lesley and I have known each other for about a decade. I've known your work. I would like to start you off with color, because you have said that color is the engine for your painting. And I'd love to hear you more, or talk more about how it is an engine, and how you get that engine going.
Well, color is actually really hard to talk about.
Well, we start hard here. We go in hot. We come in hot.
You know, I think color is like its own being. Like it just exists, and it justifies itself by existing. But I could talk about my relationship to color, which is that I always use, I don't use many colors in my paintings. You know, they're very like vivid and colorful, but if you notice, there's only like 3 to 4 colors in each painting. And this is because I just think of color as like a material. Mm-hmm. So when I'm working with it, I think of it like almost like it has teeth. Like I know I've said it's like the painting is like a container for color. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why. I think it's, we collect a lot of ceramics. I'm really interested in ceramics, and obviously in ceramics, like glaze is actually a material, like the color of glaze is a physical mineral material. But I do start, when I start in a way that it would be the engine for the painting is that when I begin a painting, I begin with a set of colors, and that's all I know that's gonna happen in the painting. Okay. And it might be, I used to paint paint still lives, some people might know. But then that sort of gave way to, now there's sort of no rules to how I start. I might be inspired by like, I don't know, a holly tree on my walk in the morning, or mm-hmm. like my coffee mug, or
so some sort of experience, some sort of visual or tactile experience,
some
perhaps.
sort of visual or tactile experience. Yeah. It could be an earlier painting of mine. It could be a painting of somebody else's, or anything really that I grabbed onto that morning. Sometimes it's like, because I start the painting, it's sort of like whatever strikes me that day, and then I'm sort of like stuck with whatever struck me that day. You know, which is crazy.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Does that mean, in a sense, when you say you sort of start with some colors, say this painting that I'm staring at, you're like, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna work with these colors on this size canvas. As we see, there are different size works in here. You work at different sizes, mm-hmm. and there's different scale properties within those sizes. But for example, this painting, I think about how you use pinks a lot, how you use yes. blues a lot. So perhaps as an example, to illustrate what you're talking about, maybe you could talk about this color in this painting.
Yes, with this painting was a real journey. This is an example of how I never know what's gonna happen when I start the painting, and that's what makes it so exciting to start every painting, because I don't know. But sometimes I think I know, and I actually never do know. But like with this painting, I've made other works with this kind of brushy, salmon-y pink and green, and I had an idea in my mind, like, okay, I'm gonna make another painting with a certain set of colors that I've used before, but then it just didn't work. So then the painting goes on its own journey. And
wait, Les, tell us more about the not working. Tell us more, like, because I'm sure we have artists in the audience, but also people who are not audiences and artists, and don't know anything about what it's like to stand in front of a blank canvas or something that is, as you say, not working. Can you say more about that? Because that's the part about being an artist. It's like the dirty stuff that nobody really will talk about.
Yeah.
And how you get through it if it's not working.
Well, often, like, if it's not working, it leads to something exciting. What I do tell myself is it's not working, but maybe it will lead to something. Mm-hmm. It often, exciting things come from not working, as some people in here know. And in this case, actually, all of this, this black and white kind of ropey schmear on top of this, that came this night of like despair of like, this is not working. So I just had to wipe the whole thing away, and then I'm just going to go with this last ditch effort to sort of try something, and then I could tell it was something. So But
So there was something there you were holding on to, but you still weren't seeing or feeling what you needed to.
I've talked about like, I don't know how to start. I sort of have to start talking. So I start, the first stage of my process are these kind of smeared or brushy areas. That's where I start the painting, and that's the engine of the painting, and that's like what generates the painting. And then I sort of am trying to figure out the composition like around these areas. So it's like a collage, but in reverse almost, if that makes sense. Like, so I remove, it's just very hard to explain, but I remove a lot of paint, and then I leave a lot of areas, and then I have to figure it out. But in the stage when I'm figuring out the composition, I work all like wet on wet, and I have to just keep coming back day after until I get it right. And this is because I don't paint on top. You know, like this white is on top, looks like it's on top of the green, or it looks like it's on top of this, but I don't paint it on top of that. If that it's hard to explain, but so there's a lot of dimensionality and a lot of layers, but everything sits actually in one layer, and I don't paint on top of a line.
Lesley, why is that? Like, why? What about a really flat surface or sort of unified surface, not painting on top of other areas, playing with those tricks of what's on top and what's under? I think my question is like, what are you seeking in that? What is the...
Well, I don't
Where
want
does that
the
come
viewer
from,
to
maybe?
I don't want anyone to trace the steps, I guess,
Okay.
backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, a painting is a mysterious thing. There's so much that goes into making a painting that you don't see and you don't know, and what makes a painting work doesn't make, you know, logical sense all the time, but you just sort of have to like be open. I don't know, but in a lot of ways the work is like a collision of opposites, because they're very flat, but yet they're very sculptural, you know, and then they're very, you can see like they're very slick, you know, the surface, the paint really sits on the surface, but yet you can see like the weave of the linen. That's important to me, and like the linen on the side. So, yes.
And speaking of the sculptural quality that you just mentioned, perhaps talk about the shadows, because this is another sort of thing that you really go after in your work. If everybody here sort of looks around, there's often these sort of dropped shadows that is something that we sort of know from still life, but this is something really important to you. I'd love to hear you talk more about it, like why you do it, where you're doing it, what kind of logic you use, that you use with them. Yeah.
The shadows I think of as just as like line, or just something fun to play with, really, and to create just push and pull in the painting in areas where I think they need it. But I do think there's a feeling of a paint, like it's a representational painting of something abstract, you know, and it feels more grounded because of the shadows. And there is something, you know, there's such a recognition and a comfort from seeing a painting that looks like something that feels like it's real and tangible, you know, but
like it's a place.
Like it's a place. Like
Yeah,
it's a place, it's a comfortable place. And then the longer you spend looking at it, the less comfortable it becomes, and the stranger it becomes, and it's like, wait, what? But I'm a big fan of Magritte. I've talked about Magritte a lot, and you know, his paintings, the way they operate, like you know, you see it, and it's like, this feels familiar to me in this scene, and then they become so much more strange, like the experience of looking at a Magritte painting, and it's partly because, you know, you kind of feel like you know it, you know.
Yeah.
And then kind of, it's slowly, the longer you spend with it, the stranger it gets. Not like you kind of see it from across the room and it's like, well, that's crazy. It just becomes more crazy the more time you give it, you know.
And Lesley, I feel that in this show, there are a lot of sort of signature gestures. Of course, moving through those ideas and sort of developing certain motifs that you're really attracted to. And often in your shows, you have a painting that's like, and now for something completely different. And I feel that this painting
Yes,
is a little of this. And I admitted to you this is a bit my favorite in this show, or at least the day that I told you. But it might be nice, since we were just talking about that painting for so long, to sort of offer some contrast to those of us in the room about, okay, well, it almost seems like it's like a different painter. Of course, for those looking closely, there's the sinuousness, et cetera. But then you have this really hard line right down the center of the painting. Tell us more about this work and where it comes from.
I know there's always in the show like a painting that maybe sets me on a new track, or it's a surprise to me as well. This painting is a huge surprise.
Yeah. Where did it come from? Kind of.
Where did it come from? Which is funny, because actually this is a painting that I took inspiration from a painting of mine from like 6 years ago or something, that I was sort of like, I kind of feel like revisit. It did have a similar line down the middle, but it's like smaller and different, just, a much different, but I don't know, the colors are I'm pretty amazed by the colors.
Really?
I'm excited about the colors in this painting. I was thinking about, with this particular red and this kind of turquoisey green, I was thinking about an earlier painting I made that you come on, and just the way this particular color of green and red kind of vibrate against each other. And I'm often thinking about like foreground and background flipping on each other, and playing around with space in that way, sort of, again, like a Magritte reference to Magritte in a way, but this is hard for me to talk. It's hard to talk about this painting. This painting, it's like I could just stare at it. It's a hypnotizing painting.
Well, I'll tell you what I see a little bit. Maybe it's very bodily. It has a real like torso sort of quality to it. I know that is an unfair read to an abstract painter, but there's still like this kind of. I think there's an address that's different.
There's like a hair. I mean, I think there's
a little bit like we've talked about Christina Ramberg, who's an artist favorite of both of ours we share, and I can't help but think about, that there could be just sort of like a finger slipping under the edge of the corset or something, and the way that she always painted torsos, and it has a really blonde hair sort of quality, but that to me is one of the reasons that it's so different from some of the other works, which are much more sort of all over painting, central image, quite a bit different. I mean, if anything, I suppose to me it comes closer to that painting on the far wall behind us all, which has more like harder lines and not the what you call the smush, right? Yeah. The smush. Technical term, the smush. And I really also love what you've done, this just really subtle move with the color down, where it doesn't even read at first. There's sort of an immediate like, oh, it's this color, and then before you know it, it's a very different color.
Yes, yeah.
When you said this is like, this surprised you, but you're sort of had been looking at your work and maybe going, oh, that was kind of, I like that. And artists do that all the time in my experience. They're sort of, wait, that was a good idea. Maybe I'm gonna try that again with, 10 years of painting behind me or whatever that is. And how artists sort of do that so often later in the career when we're making a survey and they look at something from like maybe 40 years before and like, oh, I should do that again. That was really good. Yeah. But do you find ever that you like this so much, you're like, oh, I think I want to keep doing something like this, or just who knows?
Yeah,
Probably
no,
who knows,
I mean,
right?
I wish I probably will. I wish I was a painter who was like, I'm just gonna make a show of just this kind of painting now, and it would make my life a lot easier, but I'm not.
But that wouldn't be any fun.
That would be boring.
That would be any fun.
That would be boring.
Life is supposed to be hard.
But I mean, it is still a piece with like, you know, it's maybe a little more static than the others, but it is still, I think, existing in sort of a state of transformation. You know, it is sort of still like you push the pause button. You know, it's not as maybe moving as this one, you know, in terms of the painting has a before and the painting has an after. Or I guess I didn't say that, but I often think of them as like existing in a state of transformation. Like there's like, you can sort of imagine a before and an after to the painting. And though this one does have that, although it's a more maybe static image.
Well, since we're revolving like a clock around the show, you talked to me a little about some newer things in this body of work. One of those was the way that you were painting, which you mentioned previously about more wet paint, like a more wet on wet, which was new to you. And you admitted, which I love hearing, that some of that is pragmatic. Like art is not just I get all the time I want in my studio and I can try anything I want. Sometimes it's like I have a show in 9 months. I need to work at a certain rate. And you learn new things, and sometimes those things work out great, and sometimes they're, you know, you flip back. But what I was starting my sentence with is that you were talking about some of the ways that you're finishing passages in some of these paintings with not the finished,
not the edge.
The edge or the finished kind of brushstroke, like the painting we were just looking at, but like here. Would you be willing to talk more about that?
I mean, I've allowed myself to break like a rule I had, which is sort of that you could never see. The paintings are always they're very circular. The energy is very, you know, they kind of turn in on the movement is very you're always moving. I think within the
very
painting.
Circular. Yeah.
And you know, in fact, like one thing when the painting's not working, like it's all about finding the moment that is Ricky, my husband, who's a sculptor, he'll be like, it's clogging the feet. And it is like finding, it's like sometimes when something's not working, it's just because there's almost like a traffic jam in one area and my eye just stops moving. And I'm sort of like, why isn't this working? And I find the place where my eye stops. And that's the area that is not working, that I need to unclog or something. But so I did have sort of a thing of like, you can never find these, you know, like I think in the past I would have covered up this sort of edge, you know.
Like you really just sort of wanted an unimpeded passage.
Like no stopping point, you know, like no end. But
and in this show you've done it in a few places. As long as the ends keep
everything moving, you know, as long as everything is moving, then I keep the ends, and it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun, you know.
And in terms of getting stuck or the eye or clogging the feed, tell us a bit, if you will, about, you know, when it's not stuck anymore, when you know that it's done and you can step away from it and stop painting on the work.
Well, this is like, I've often talked about it like raising a child, or it's a planetary thing. But so when I'm sort of, I do feel like when I start the painting, I'm very involved. You know, I have to figure out the composition of the painting. I think the painting really needs me to bring it into existence, to bring it to life. And then, you know, the longer I work on it, the less it needs me. And at some moment, I'm just like a slave to the painting. And I'm just like, what do you need from me, painting? Then it's sort of like, and then I always know there's like this moment where it starts to like rebel against me, and I know it's done. But which means like I'll keep working on it, and then I fudge something, and then I'm like, I know you're done. Okay, I know, I hear you.
And you've also said something about it feeling real, and that's such a slippery kind of interesting way to describe something, because obviously what feels real to one person may not to another. And talk more about maybe to you what it feels real is.
Right. Well, I'm waiting for it to become its own autonomous reality. Like I'm waiting for it to feel as though I didn't make it in a way, you know,
In that sense, are you sort of, it's surprising you, or is it more of a, who made this? This is just here. It no longer needs me, as you were just alluding to.
Yeah, all I can say is like I'll be working, at the stage of the process where I'm figuring out the composition of the painting, and that's when I keep it wet the whole time I'm figuring it out, and I come like day after day, and I have to just keep it all kind of wet until I nail it. But I've said it's sort of like becoming like at the part that when I'm making the composition, it's really like, automatic drawing. I close my eyes sometimes. I just, I'm just sort of, it's like when you walk in a dark room and you can see nothing in the room, and then the longer you spend in the room, you sort of see the outline of furniture, and then at some point, you're not going to trip on stuff when you walk across the room, because you can see. That's sort of what it's like. It just feels like, what is this? What is this going to be? And then, there's always a moment when, maybe there's something it's sort of about, I have to not pay attention and pay attention. I'm really relying on it's a lot relying on like chance to give me gifts, but and sort of being open to all possibilities of what can happen. Yeah. And kind of when things go wrong is when I think I know what I'm doing, and then you just have to start over, or mess it up. But and I can't explain it, but I just know, like, okay, wait, something is here. I can think this is it, and then it, just like I see things in the dark room, and then I can kind of make the composition, and then it's kind of, I am waiting. There is a feeling, like there's a moment where it's sort of like, it's orbiting around me, and then it like gets out of the orbit and goes off and does its own thing. And then I do feel like I'm at the service of the painting. And actually when I put in the shadows, like the drop shadows, that's part of it. I'm sort of like, where do you need me to put these, Okay. Because I don't do that at the beginning. I do that closer to the end, And it's like, I'm after kind of, it's hard to explain like this distance. I've talked about like Lee Krasner's work. I love Lee Krasner's work. But it's like, I feel some kind of, cerebral distance that I love in her work, that it's not just like there's some kind of distance I want to impart where it is creating its own autonomous reality.
I want to pick out something that you just mentioned, which is such a nice metaphor. Where you said it's like walking around in the dark, and then it's sort of the eyes lighten, etc. That brings up what you have talked about, where these pictures come from, which is not actually from your head necessarily. You mentioned already about like colors and looking and whatnot, but to make clear, you start with a kind of wild in the dark painting, and then you respond to what you put down.
Yeah, it's
very and much, the image kind of is emerging out of that process.
Yes, it's very much like call and response. It's like it's the whole life of the painting.
All of which you're creating.
Yeah, and it's like I don't make studies, and I don't know ahead of time, and I never use tape or anything. Like so many people are like, "Do you use tape?" Never. But it is like I have a process-based practice. You would say, I don't. I don't like sit on a chair and look at the painting and go, this is what I'm going to do. I'm really relying on the act of painting to create the painting. Like for me, it's abstraction happens. I'm not thinking about it. It's not the goal. Yeah. It's just what happens. What happens.
So you have mentioned Magritte and Lee Krasner. I wanted to ask you, because I love, I am a historian, art historian. What is one of the first artworks or artists that you fell in love with?
Oh, wow. I love artists. Artists love artists. The very first, really like Georgia O'Keeffe and Magritte are kind of the first artists I remember loving. And
do you remember where you saw those works? Like, was it a museum or a book?
I'm from Milwaukee, and Georgia O'Keeffe's from Wisconsin, so
They were in the museum.
Yeah, Wisconsin likes to take ownership of Georgia O'Keeffe, even though New Mexico really. Anyway, but so that was like, I think she might have been the first artist I learned about in school, to be honest, was Georgia O'Keeffe.
A woman? Stop.
Seriously, I know, right? It's true. It's true. Yeah. So, but I'm a huge fan. There's so much work. Those are like sort of. I didn't even realize I was thinking about Magritte until I had Xavier Hufkens, my Belgian dealer, was in my studio, and he was like, Magritte, and I was like, oh, okay.
And that was an artist that you looked at, and
yes.
Magritte, I think also when you're young is a little bit of like a gateway drug.
I was like, can it be Magritte?
Yeah, and then you realize, this is really incredible.
Magritte. I can't believe that. And then I thought, I remember having the postcard on my wall in high school.
Yeah.
But I have, many books on my studio table. They're sort of like.
And they're sort of the same books by and large. There'll be additions, but you have a kind of like.
I have Carla,
you have your touchstones.
There's an Italian painter, Carlo Cardi's, a big touch, huge, important for me. Juan Gris, actually. Juan Gris is someone I figured out from Juan Gris that like tightness, like tautness, is more kind of weird than messy, crazy, drippy, expressive paintings. It's actually.
And he was so great with color too.
Yeah, and he has really weird colors that are like in between colors,
Yeah.
and weird colors together.
Yeah.
And Milton Avery and Ken Price.
You've talked about a Milton Avery blue.
Yeah, this one is very.
Is this one?
This is a very Milton Avery blue.
Yeah.
But also, he's a master colorist who didn't use many colors. But and then like Matisse cutouts. I think that show had a big impact on me.
And there's a beautiful book on the front desk of another artist who has that you've looked to.
Oh yeah, Anna Zemenkova.
Yeah, and you got to put your work together with hers in an exhibition at the gallery.
Yes.
Okay, so before I spirit you and all of us to the very small watercolors room, we could set that up. But first, does anybody have any burning questions they want to ask in here right now to Lesley?
I have a question.
Yes.
So do you work on multiple paintings simultaneously, or is it sequential?
Yeah, so I'll work on multiple paintings simultaneously, but not on the same day. Like not at the same. So I'll have like three paintings that are at the same stage, but I don't. I'll be at a place with this painting, for example, and I'll just come back day after day till I get this painting, and then and that's sort of if I just work on. Well, that's because of drawing time actually, because there's
the pragmatics of it.
There's pragmatic drawing time, but also there's a way, like if I just work on one painting, I get really too fussy. I get too finicky. Like it does help to have more going on at the same time in terms of just like letting things go.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead. And then.
You said something earlier about like not wanting people to sort of backward engineer or figure out how you put the process, how you put all of it together. And I was kind of wondering why that is, because I still will continue to like wonder and try to work it out and convince myself that I've figured it out or something. Like that's something that you can't actually literally control, but you can kind of like obfuscate more or something. I was wondering what draws you to that.
I mean, that's partly why, because you spend some time trying to figure it out and thinking like, oh, maybe it's this way. It's sort of about, as a painter, as an artist, you just don't want people to look at your, people just come look at the painting and turn around and leave. And you want to invite like longer looking, and I think like.
So it's a tool of seduction, is what
it's a tool of seduction. It's a tool of mystery and seduction.
Look out.
And then there's a lot of like, well, this works, doing it like this, and this is important to me, and I don't really ask why, because that's painting is like that. And you're like, why does there's just.
Yeah,
They're just weird, you set up a framework and I don't know.
Yeah. Did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. I love what you said about collision of opposites. That's such an awesome way to think about it. But I was wondering what, if any, relationship you have or interest you have with collage. Like, is that something that you feel drawn to separately from paintings?
I mean, for sure, but yeah, I would say like Lee Krasner's collage paintings, where that was like a huge breakthrough moment for me. Like I had always been into her paintings, but when I discovered her like collage paintings, which she made from like mistakes, when she also a moment of despair in her studio where she just
Like cutting up a painting?
yeah, and then saw all the torn bits, cutting a painting up in frustration and seeing the torn bits on the floor and kind of realizing, oh, I could put these like on a painting, and I think it's just, I think it's something to do with that distance or it's hard for me to articulate why that's important to me, but can you, Jenelle?
I cannot. Well, let's introduce the watercolors, because actually like thinking about, talking about collage, and it's not something that you practically do, but you do and have for years make watercolors. So, but you don't often show them, or not even,
I
not
do show them, but I just don't ever have the opportunity to show like.
Yeah, like she got 2 rooms here, so there was the, all right, I want to show the watercolors. And they do really different things. But I think what I would want to share with people as they go look at them is that you so beautifully articulated that they are premises for paintings, but not studies for paintings. They aren't. So maybe just give us this sort of intro, like some groundwork for everybody's going to look at them about when you make them and why, some of the reasons why you're making them.
Well, I love my watercolors.
Is it the fun part?
It's the most.
If this is the hard part,
it's one of
is
the
it the
most
fun
fun parts.
Yeah.
Well, with the watercolors, I often make them after I finish like a big show like this. I'll take like a month and just make watercolors, which is like, I mean, I don't know the term palette cleanser, but it's sort of like
It's like a break.
it's like a break. It like
yeah.
clears me out. It's like, and it's with the watercolors. I just think about color with them, which you'll see when you see them. Those the whole time I'm making them, I'm just thinking color, and how to get the color, more impactful color. So,
And they're very bright and jewel-like colors. And there's, you really see the quality of the paper that you use, or the substrate. Is it a paper? Or
it's a paper.
Okay,
yeah,
it has such a plasticated kind of surface.
It just has like a smooth surface.
A coating.
The water
Okay.
coated, yeah. So
Yeah.
the watercolor sits on the surface. Which,
Yeah, and so there's a lot more sort of where you can see the pull of the brush,
Yeah.
and things like that. And some of them have quite a conversation with maybe weaving, where you see more of like over
and it's a
movements.
real materiality to the color.
Yeah.
And yeah, the really nice thing about them is because the color sits on the surface, I can rework them at any time. So I could actually, even though like after this I'll start making a group of watercolors, I can just come back to them.
Just add water.
In 6 months and then just, rework, rework them. And they're not studies, and they aren't premises for the painting either. It's just like sometimes I'll make one and I'll think, this is this is a good premise for a painting once in a while.
Yeah.
But in terms of, and that might be like these colors or this kind of, you'll see, you'll understand, I think, if you've seen them or when you see them.
Yeah. So as I said, those of you who can stick with us, we'll head down the stair to that gallery, and because it's little, Lesley and I'll hang out outside, and we can talk a bit more about them if people have questions, or just talk informally without mics, where you will not be recorded for posterity. Does that sound good? Okay, so that way and out. Yeah.